The Vorkai Empire had a wall. It stood in the Grand Council chamber on their homeworld Vork Prime, 30 meters long, 3 meters high. Carved from black volcanic stone that had been polished for so many generations it shone like the surface of a dark lake. On quiet afternoons, when the light from Vork Prime's sun came through the tall chamber windows at the right angle, the wall seemed almost to breathe. On it were names. 164 names, each one cut by hand into the stone and filled with molten gold. They were the names of civilizations, species, empires. Every one of them was gone now, either absorbed into the Vorkai Empire as conquered territory, or destroyed so completely that nothing remained but ruins and memory. The Vorkai called it the Wall of Proof, not the Wall of Glory, not the Wall of Victory. Those names would have felt too emotional, too theatrical, and the Vorkai were not an emotional or theatrical people. They were precise. They were calculating. The wall was proof, plain and simple, proof that their strategy worked, proof that their warships were the finest ever built, proof that their soldiers were the best trained in the known galaxy, proof that 164 times the Vorkai had met an enemy in open battle, and 164 times the enemy had lost. There was a ceremony for each name, after a conquest was complete, after the last enemy ship had gone dark or surrendered, after the planet had fallen. A master craftsman was brought to the council chamber. He would take his tools and spend 3 days cutting the new name into the stone, perfectly proportioned letters, perfectly spaced. Then the gold was poured. Then the wall grew by one more name. Then the celebrations would begin. Supreme Commander Zethkar had attended 22 of those ceremonies in his lifetime. He had fought in 11 of the campaigns personally, watching the others from a command chair, or through the reports that came across his desk. He was old now, his skin faded from the deep blue of his youth to the gray-silver that marked a Vorkai who had passed through 7 decades of life. His body was still strong, though, his mind sharper than most males half his age. Every morning, before his meetings and briefings and the endless responsibilities of commanding the greatest military empire in the galaxy, Zethkar walked the wall. He did it alone. He started at the first name, the Hareki Dominion, conquered before his grandfather was born, and he walked slowly to the end, to the 164th name, the Thalori Sovereignty, his most recent campaign, his most recent victory. Then he would stop, and he would look at the empty space beyond that final name. Space for more. There was always space for more. He was finishing his walk on an ordinary morning when his senior aide entered the chamber at a quick step, the kind of step that meant news. The aide was young, barely 30, with the crisp uniform and careful movements of someone who had studied exactly how to present information to a superior officer without wasting a single word. Supreme Commander, the deep survey team from Sector 44 has returned. Zethkar kept looking at the wall. Report. One civilization found single-planet species, calls itself humanity. Their world is called Earth. Third planet from a yellow star approximately 700 light-years from our current outer border. Single planet. Zethkar turned. They have not colonized beyond their own star system. They have a very small number of research outposts on their neighboring planets. Nothing that could be called a military presence. No colonies. Their entire civilization exists on one world, Supreme Commander. Zethkar was quiet for a moment. What are their weapons? Chemical propellant projectile weapons, primarily. Early-stage directed energy weapons, still in development. Missiles of limited range. Their warships are small. Our analysts say their largest warship is about the size of one of our standard supply carriers. Nothing larger. Nothing with faster-than-light capability, though they appear to be researching it. Population? Approximately 8 billion. A pause. Then Zethkar made the low rumbling sound that was the Vorkai equivalent of a laugh. He turned back to the wall, found the empty gold space beyond the 164th name, and stared at it. Show me, he said. The aide produced a datapad and activated its holographic display. Images bloomed in the air. A blue and green world wrapped in white cloud, beautiful from orbit in the way that worlds rich with water often were. Thin metal ships floating in orbit like toys. City lights glittering across the dark side of the planet. Population charts, resource assessments, military capability breakdowns. Zethkar studied each image slowly. He looked at the ships for a long time, then the weapons data, then the orbital defense platforms, which were small and few. Their history, he said. The survey team recovered significant amounts of their data. Our translators are still working through most of it. But the summary is clear. They are a warlike species. They have been fighting each other for most of their recorded history. Multiple wars, some devastating. They nearly destroyed their own planet twice that we can identify. But they are currently moving toward a unified planetary government. and seemed to cooperate on defense matters even across their political divisions. Zethkar set the datapad down and linked his hands behind his back. He walked the length of the chamber slowly, saying nothing. His aide waited. He had learned not to fill Zethkar's silences. A warlike species that cannot leave their own system, Zethkar finally said. A species that has spent centuries perfecting the art of killing each other, and has nothing bigger than a supply carrier for a warship. He stopped. This would be the easiest campaign we have ever run. Our analysts estimate 3 to 7 days from first contact to full surrender, Supreme Commander. And they call that estimate generous. Very much so. Zethkar looked at the wall one more time. At the 1 in 64 gold names. At the empty space waiting. Call the council, he said. We will formalize this and assign a fleet commander. The council met 3 days later. 17 senior members of the Vorkai military and political leadership, seated around the long table in the chamber. Zethkar stood at the head of the table and presented the survey data himself, which was unusual. Normally that was a task for junior staff. But this was the 165th campaign. He wanted to look at the council's faces when they understood what they were dealing with. He was not disappointed. By the time the presentation finished, several of the council members were already smiling. Fleet Councilor Marin, the oldest member of the council, had fought in 9 campaigns. He looked at the image of Earth, hanging in holographic display above the table, at its small ships and its limited weapons, and he said what several were thinking. We are sending a full fleet for this. We are, Zethkar said. Supreme Commander, with respect, a battle group of 10 ships would accomplish this in the same time. Why allocate 40 warships to a civilization that cannot threaten us? Because they are unknown, and the unknown is the only thing that has ever hurt us. The chamber was quiet. The older council members nodded. The younger ones listened carefully, understanding that they were being taught something. Fleet Councilor Marin said nothing more. The vote was unanimous. A full battle fleet of 40 warships would be dispatched to the human solar system. Fleet Commander Drath was assigned command. The finest active fleet commander the Vorkai had. Winner of 4 campaigns without the loss of a single ship to enemy fire. Some people thought assigning Drath to such a small mission was excessive. Zethkar thought it was appropriate. The 165th victory would be recorded for all of Vorkai history. He wanted it handled with complete perfection. The fleet assembled at the staging point over the following 3 weeks. 40 warships, ranging from fast patrol destroyers to 4 heavy dreadnoughts capable of cracking the surface of a moon. Carrier vessels with fighter complement, supply ships, and 6 troop transports carrying a total of 12,000 Vorkai ground soldiers, equipped with the best infantry weapons their empire could produce. Fleet Commander Drath reviewed his force from the observation deck of his flagship, the carrier dreadnought had called Vorkai's Fist. He was a lean male, quiet, with a face that gave nothing away. He had read every report the survey team filed on Earth. He had read the translated portions of human history. He had studied their ships and their weapons, and their military doctrine in as much detail as the survey data allowed. Then he had set it all aside and written his battle plan in 4 pages, because that was all it required. He walked his captains one by one through the plan. Most of them had the professional calm of experienced officers. A few of the younger captains had a harder time hiding how they felt, which was that this was not a mission requiring much planning at all. One of his captains, a young male named Sirach, who was on his first campaign, said it plainly. Fleet Commander, their ships cannot survive one engagement with even our lightest destroyer. Their weapons cannot penetrate our hull plating. Their orbital stations are not designed for combat. By any measure, this is. Complete the thought carefully, Drath said. Sarek considered. A formality, sir. Drath looked at him for a moment. Do you know why the Vorkai have never lost a campaign? Our superior technology and because we do not treat any campaign as a formality. Drath's voice was flat and even, not angry, just certain. Every enemy we have ever fought believed they had something worth fighting for. Every species we have ever encountered surprised us in at least one way we did not expect. You will treat these humans as a capable enemy until they are defeated, and their surrender is in my hand. Then you may call it a formality. Captain Sirach straightened. Yes, Fleet Commander. After the captains were dismissed, Drath stood alone on the observation deck and looked out at his fleet. 40 ships hanging against the stars, quiet and vast, their running lights blinking in the dark. He thought about the human history files, the wars, the way they described their own wars, with horror sometimes, but also with a strange pride. The way they wrote about the ones who kept fighting when everything said they should have stopped. The way they celebrated people who refused to give up even when giving up was the logical choice. Stubborn, he thought, They are a stubborn species. Stubbornness was not a weapon. He reminded himself of that. All ships report ready, Fleet Commander, his communications officer said over his earpiece. Drath turned from the window and walked to his command chair. He settled into it, pulled up the navigation display, and confirmed the course plot to the human solar system. 17 days. All ships begin transit sequence, he said. The 40 warships of the Vorkai battle fleet began to move. Slowly at first, their massive drives building power, then faster, falling into the precise formation that Drath's battle plan required. They moved with the quiet confidence of something that had done this before. Many times. Something that had never lost. Behind them, on Vork Prime, the wall of proof stood in the Grand Council chamber, its 164 names gleaming. Space at the end, waiting. In the solar system 700 light-years away, a blue-green planet turned in the light of a yellow sun. Its ocean shimmered. Its cloud cover shifted. Its city lights blinked on as the dark side turned into evening. It had no idea. Or at least, that was what the Vorkai believed. 17 days away, something was moving through the dark of space, and it was very sure of itself. The signal reached Earth 14 days after the Vorkai fleet left their staging point. It came in on a frequency that no human-built receiver had ever picked up before. It came from far out in deep space, past the edge of the solar system, past the listening posts humanity had placed on the outer planets, past every sensor array that Earth's defense network had built in the last 40 years. It was faint at first, just a ghost signal that the automated systems flagged as unusual. Within 3 hours, the signal was strong enough to analyze. Within 5 hours, it was clear that it was not coming from any known human installation. Within 8 hours, the Deep Space Array at Lunar Station 7 had triangulated its source and confirmed what the senior analysts in the Defense Coordination Center in Geneva already suspected. The signal was coming from outside the solar system, and it was moving toward them. Defense Director Elena Vasquez was in the middle of a budget meeting when her deputy appeared at the door of the conference room with an expression she had learned to read over 15 years of working with him. That expression meant everything else could wait. She excused herself and followed him into the corridor. He handed her a tablet. She read it once, quickly. Then she read it again, slowly. Then she handed it back and stood very still for a moment with her eyes focused on nothing. "How long have we known?" she said. "Analysis team confirmed it 4 hours ago. They wanted to be absolutely certain before escalating." "Good. That was the right call." She started walking. "Get me the full signal data, the triangulation data, and every analyst we have who worked on Project Shepard. Now, and get me General Kane on a secure line. Already placed the call, Director. He's waiting." She nodded and kept walking. Vasquez was 47 years old, with dark hair that she kept short because she had no patience for anything that required maintenance. She had spent her career in planetary defense, working her way up from a junior signals analyst in the early days of Earth's Unified Defense Program to the Director of Global Defense Coordination, the most senior military position on the planet. She was known for 2 things. She never panicked, and she was almost always right. Right now she was thinking about something that had happened 31 years ago, when she was 16 years old, sitting in a classroom in Buenos Aires. Her teacher had put a question on the board. What is the greatest lesson history has ever taught us? The students gave the usual answers. Never start a war you cannot win. Power corrupts. Unite or fall. Her teacher had nodded politely at all of them. Then the teacher said, "The greatest lesson history has ever taught us is this. The one who prepares wins, every time. Not the strongest, not the largest, not the most advanced. The one who was ready." Vasquez had remembered that. More than that, she had built her career on it. The Defense Coordination Center was buried 200 meters below Geneva, in a complex that had taken 11 years to build, and that officially did not exist on any public record. Its full name, known only to about 3,000 people on the planet, was the Integrated Planetary Defense Coordination and Response Center. Everyone who worked there called it the Hole. Vasquez reached the Hole in 40 minutes. General Marcus Kane was already there, standing over the main tactical display table with 3 senior analysts. Kane was a big man, dark-skinned, with the kind of physical stillness that came from decades of military training. He had commanded the Joint Earth Defense Force for 6 years. He and Vasquez had worked together for most of that time. They disagreed on many things and trusted each other completely. "The signal has increased in strength again in the last hour," Kane said by way of greeting. "The triangulation is solid. Multiple sources, all converging on the same origin point. Fleet-sized energy signatures. How far? 3 days out from the outer edge of the system. At current speed, they'll cross the heliopause in 72 hours. Inner solar system in roughly 5 days after that." Vasquez looked at the display. A red marker was moving slowly toward the center of the map, toward the small blue circle that represented Earth. She looked at it for a moment, breathing slowly. "Is Shepard ready?" she said. Kane looked at her. The analyst near him found something to look at on the other side of the room. "Director," Kane said carefully, "Shepard has been in operational testing for 14 months. It has never been tested under actual combat conditions. We don't know. Is it ready?" He was quiet for a moment. "Dr. Patel says yes. Then it's ready." She pulled up a chair and sat down at the table. "Call Patel in. And I want the full Shepard team here within 6 hours. And Marcus," she looked up at him, "start activating the contingency protocols. All of them." Kane nodded once and started giving orders. For the next 2 hours, Vasquez sat at the table and read files. Not the signal data, not the tactical projections, not the energy readings. She read history. The files she had put together herself, over many years, whenever she had time to think about the question that had occupied the back of her mind for most of her professional life. What would happen if something came for Earth? Not an asteroid, not a rogue AI, something that chose to come. Something with ships and weapons and the intention to conquer. The files she had built in response to that question were detailed, comprehensive. 30 years of reading, research, and planning, kept in an encrypted database that no one else could access. History files, mostly, not human history, alien history. It had started with the first confirmed alien signal, received 18 years ago. A faint transmission, ultimately determined to be an automated beacon from a dead civilization. But it had told Earth's analysts two things. There were other civilizations out there, and at least one of them was dead. For a long time, humanity debated whether that dead civilization had died on its own or had been killed. The debate never fully resolved. Then 11 years ago, a second signal, stronger. Clearly a communication of some kind. Impossible to decode at first, but over the following 3 years, humanity's best linguists and mathematicians had cracked most of it. What they found changed everything. It was a warning, left behind by a species that called itself the Sulhari. A long, detailed warning, broadcast on a frequency that would eventually reach every technological civilization in the galaxy. Assuming those civilizations had enough time to receive and decode it, the Sulhari had been a spacefaring civilization for over 1,000 years. They had colonies on 20 worlds. They had been expanding carefully and peacefully for centuries. Then something had come for them, the Vorkai. The Sulhari broadcast described them in careful detail, their ships, their tactics, their weapons, their social structure, their method of conquest. The broadcast ended partway through, cut off mid-sentence, as if the last transmitter had been destroyed while still sending. That broadcast had started Project Shepard. Dr. Aryan Patel arrived at the hole 5 hours after Vasquez's call. He was 42, small and slightly built, with the distracted look of someone whose mind was always running 3 problems ahead of the conversation. He was the most important person on the planet, a fact he was quietly uncomfortable with. He led the team of 500 scientists and engineers, who had spent the last 11 years building something that had never been built before. Vasquez met him at the entrance of the main operations room. She skipped the greeting. "The signal is confirmed," she said. "It matches the ship signatures in the Sulhari records. Fleet-sized. Approaching from the direction the Sulhari records indicated the Vorkai operate in." Patel pulled up the signal data on his tablet. He was quiet for a long time, scrolling through numbers. Then he set the tablet down and rubbed his eyes. "We knew this day might come," he said. "We built for it," Vasquez said. "Is it ready, Aryan?" The real answer, not the answer from the test reports. Patel thought for a moment. There was a long pause. "Yes," he said. "But Director, what we built was designed based on the Sulhari records and our analysis of the physics involved. We have never seen Vorkai ships in person. We have never tested against their actual materials or their actual shielding. There are variables we cannot account for. There always are." "Yes." He paused. "The principles are sound. The engineering is sound. Everything we understand says it will work." He looked at her steadily. "But I want you to understand that we are going to find out things we don't know once the shooting starts." "I understand." Vasquez turned back to the tactical display. "Get your team settled in. I want full readiness reports every 4 hours. Patel nodded and moved away. General Kane appeared at Vasquez's shoulder. "Contingency protocols are active. We've begun the quiet evacuations from the most exposed surface positions. Public messaging protocols are ready to go when you give the order." "Not yet," Vasquez said. "I want to wait until we have a clearer read on their approach and intentions. The last thing we need is 8 billion people in full panic before we know what we're dealing with." Kane accepted this. He had learned not to argue with Vasquez's pacing. She was almost always right about timing. Over the next 48 hours, the hole became the nerve center of everything. The signal from the approaching fleet grew stronger by the hour. Better resolution on the energy readings meant better ship counts, 40 warships, massive by any standard Earth had ever measured against. The four heaviest signatures were clearly dreadnoughts, a class of warship the Sulhari records described in detail. Ships so large they were designed to crack through a planet's atmospheric shield with sustained bombardment. The analysts were careful with their expressions when they reported these numbers. Some of them were less careful in the corridors, where Vasquez occasionally heard the word she had specifically asked people not to use. Impossible. She understood why they said it. She had said it herself, once 11 years ago, reading the Sulhari records for the first time. 40 warships from a civilization that had beaten 164 other civilizations, coming to a planet that, as far as anyone knew, had never fought a battle beyond its own atmosphere. By any rational measurement, this was impossible to survive, but Vasquez had not spent 30 years preparing for the rational measurement. She had spent 30 years preparing for the actual fight, and the actual fight, she had always believed, was never decided by who had the better weapons on paper. It was decided by who had thought harder about winning. She stood at the tactical display on the last night before the Vorkai fleet would enter the outer solar system. The whole was quiet around her. Most of the staff had rotated for rest. The overnight watch moved slowly, checking their stations, updating their data. On the display, the red marker moved, steady, patient, certain. Behind Vasquez, on a secondary display that she had quietly left active, an image played on loop. It was from the Sulhari records, a planet the Sulhari had described in their warning. The third world they had tried to defend against the Vorkai. A world that had possessed more warships than Earth had by a significant measure. A more advanced civilization, better weapons, more experience in space combat. The Vorkai had reduced it to a scorched ruin in 11 days. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she turned back to the tactical display. She thought about her teacher's question, 31 years ago. The one who prepares wins, director. The overnight watch officer's voice was quiet. The fleet just crossed the outer heliopause marker. They're inside the system. Vasquez straightened. Sound the full readiness, she said. Wake everyone up. A moment later, the alarm tones began to sound through the hole. Soft but clear. People came awake, came to their stations, came to their posts. Vasquez looked at the red marker on the tactical display. Closer now. Still moving with that same steady, patient certainty. She had one thought, very clear and very calm. They have no idea what is waiting for them. And she smiled. The Vorkai fleet crossed into the human solar system on a Tuesday. Nobody on Earth planned it that way. It was just how the numbers worked out when you factored in transit speed and distance. A Tuesday afternoon, gray and cold over Geneva, with light rain falling on the roof of the building above the hole, somewhere 200 meters over Vasquez's head. The first thing Fleet Commander Drath did after his navigation officer confirmed they had crossed the outer system boundary was order a full sensor sweep. Standard procedure. Always know your battlefield before you enter it. The results came back within the hour. Drath sat in his command chair and looked at them carefully. His senior tactical officer, a veteran named Hross who had served in 3 campaigns, stood beside him and said nothing while Drath read. Hross had learned that Drath liked silence when he was processing data. The sweep showed what the survey team had shown him. 1 inhabited world, 3rd from the yellow star. Multiple orbital stations, none heavily armed. Several small defensive platforms. A scattering of minor installations on other planets and moons. A handful of small warships in various positions around the inner system. The sensor sweep also showed something the survey team had not included in their reports. What is this reading here? Drath said. He pointed to a dense cluster of small energy signals that appeared to be distributed throughout the inner system in a wide, loosely structured pattern. They were faint, easy to miss. The kind of thing that a less careful sensor operator might have written off as interference. Hross leaned over the display. He studied it. Low-power signatures. Very small individual sources, widely spaced. He ran the data through the analysis system for a moment. Could be debris, meteoroid material. Some of those signals look similar to the interference patterns we get in asteroid belts. Are there asteroids in that region? No significant concentration, sir. Drath looked at the readings for another moment. Then he looked up at the main viewport. The solar system was spread out before him, unimaginably vast, the yellow star bright at its center. Flag it, he said. Monitor those readings as we advance. I want to know if they change. Yes, Fleet Commander. Hross flagged the readings. The data analyst team was notified. They would watch it. Then Drath gave the order to begin the advance toward the inner system, and the fleet moved. and the flagged readings remained in the back of his mind the way small things sometimes did. Present but unurgent, like a pebble in a boot that was not quite sharp enough to demand immediate attention. He had a surrender demand to deliver. In the whole, the moment the Vorkai fleet began its inter-system advance, every display in the main operations room updated simultaneously. Vasquez was standing at the tactical table. Kane was beside her. Patel was 3 stations away, running calculations on a separate screen. The room was full, every seat occupied, every station manned. "They're moving," the tracking officer said. It was unnecessary. Everyone could see it on the displays, but people say obvious things when they are nervous. "How long to weapons range of the inner system defenses?" Kane said. "At their current speed, approximately 11 hours. Vasquez nodded. "Any communications from them?" Not yet. She had expected this. The Sulhari records described the Vorkai communication protocol in detail. They would advance to a position they considered optimal. Close enough to be visually imposing. Far enough to be out of immediate range of any defensive response. And then they would send their message. A demand. Short, blunt, surrender or be destroyed. The Sulhari had tried to negotiate. The Vorkai had given them 48 hours and then attacked. The second species in the records, the Dreth Collective, had tried stalling. Same result, different timing, same outcome. Vasquez had no intention of surrendering and no intention of negotiating. But she also had no intention of responding to the surrender demand in a way that would provoke an immediate attack before she was ready. She had a very specific response already written. It was not a surrender, and it was not defiant. It was carefully, precisely calibrated. 7 hours into the Vorkai advance, the communication came. It arrived on a broad-spectrum broadcast that hit every receiver in the solar system simultaneously. The signal was accompanied by a translation key. The Vorkai had done their homework with the survey data and translated their message into the most common human language, English, which meant their linguistics team was competent and their survey had been thorough. The message was read aloud by the communications officer in the hole. Her voice was flat and professional, which was exactly right. "To the inhabitants of the planet designated Earth, you are addressed by Fleet Commander Drath of the Vorkai Empire. The Vorkai Empire controls 164 star systems and their associated worlds. Your civilization has been assessed and found to be within the expansion boundaries of the Empire. You are offered one choice: surrender your world peacefully and accept integration into the Vorkai Empire, or refuse and face the total destruction of your military capability and the occupation of your world by force. You have 12 of your planetary rotations to respond. Refusal to respond will be treated as refusal to surrender." Silence in the hole. Then, from somewhere in the back of the room, one person started to laugh. It was a short, involuntary sound, quickly suppressed. Vasquez did not look to see who it was. She understood the impulse completely. She had already read the pre-approved response that the full Planetary Council had signed off on 2 days ago. In the event that the fleet arrived and issued exactly this message. She had written it herself. "Send the reply," she said. The communications officer sent it. Across the solar system, in the command deck of the Vorkai's Fist, Fleet Commander Drath received the human response 11 minutes after the message was delivered. He read it on his personal display without expression. Then he read it again. It said, "Fleet Commander Drath, your message has been received. We understand what you are offering. We request an additional 24 hours to formally consult with our planetary governing bodies before providing a complete response. Our preliminary position is that we do not intend to surrender. We ask that you hold your current position during this period. We also note that we are aware of your record of 164 victories. We have no doubt that you are an extremely capable military force. We wish to communicate to you, with respect, that this situation may be different from those you have encountered before. We ask that you consider this carefully during the 24-hour period we have requested." Drath read it twice. Then he handed the pad to Ross. Ross read it. He frowned slightly. "Their language software is accurate. This is a genuine translation. It appears to be." Ross set the pad down. "They are stalling, Fleet Commander. The request for 24 hours is a delay tactic. Every civilization that knows it cannot win tries to buy time at the start." "Yes," Drath said. "The note about this situation being different, that is simply defiance, posturing." "Yes," Drath said again. He was quiet for a moment. "Grant them the 24 hours. Ross looked at him. "Sir, their request is reasonable by the standards of civilized communication. We have 12 days before our operational deadline. We can afford 24 hours. He picked up the pad again and looked at the final sentences of the message. "And I want to know what they mean by different. It's bravado, sir. With respect, perhaps. Drath set the pad down, or perhaps not. Either way, I would like to understand it before we begin. Continue monitoring all sensor readings, particularly those faint energy signals. Cross acknowledged and moved away. Drath spent the next hour reviewing the sensor data himself. The faint energy signatures he had flagged on arrival were still there, distributed throughout the inner system. They had not moved. They had not changed in intensity. Whatever they were sitting quietly, waiting. He could not make them fit any category he knew. During the 24 hours that followed, the hull operated at full capacity without stop. The Shepard network ran final activation checks. The defensive grid above Earth cycled through its last readiness tests. Every human warship in the solar system moved to its assigned position. These movements were made slowly, calmly, without the kind of large-scale maneuvering that might look like preparation for an attack. Vasquez had been very specific about this. Do nothing that looks aggressive. Do nothing that looks rushed. Give them no reason to strike early. On Earth's surface, the public had been told that a significant extraterrestrial contact event was in progress, and that all citizens should shelter in place and follow emergency protocols. The message was careful, calm, and deliberately light on specifics. There were some panic in cities. There was also, in many places, something harder to describe. A kind of collective steadying, a squaring of shoulders, a clenching of jaw. Humanity had been afraid before, many times, of plagues, of its own weapons, of storms and earthquakes and famines. Fear was not new to them. What they did with it was. On the 24th hour, Vasquez sent the formal response. Drath received it and read it on the command deck, standing this time, not sitting. Fleet Commander Drath. This is Defense Director Elena Vasquez, speaking on behalf of the unified government of Earth. We have completed our consultations. Our position is final. We will not surrender. We have inhabited this world for 300,000 years. We have fought for it, suffered on it, nearly destroyed it ourselves, and survived. We do not intend to give it to anyone. We are aware of your record. We respect the capability it represents. We are also telling you honestly that we are prepared for this fight, and we are asking you, one final time, to reconsider your course of action. If you choose to advance, we will defend ourselves with everything we have. This is not bravado. This is a statement of fact. The choice is yours. Drath read it. Then he put it down and said, all ships, battle formation. We advance on the inner system. The 40 ships of the Vorkai fleet began to move again, accelerating this time. Battle formation was a tighter, more aggressive arrangement. Ships positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire, to protect each other's flanks, to respond to attack from multiple directions simultaneously. It was the formation the Vorkai had used in most of their 164 campaigns. It had never failed. Drath stood at the main viewport and watched the yellow star grow slightly brighter as they advanced. Around it, a small blue-green world turned in its orbit, patient as planets always are. He thought about the response from the human director. One phrase stood out. 300,000 years. We have inhabited this world for 300,000 years. The Sulhari had been a spacefaring civilization for 1,000 years when the Vorkai destroyed them. The Thalori sovereignty, the most recent name on the wall, had been active for 800 years. Most of the civilizations the Vorkai had fought were measured in centuries. 300,000 years. He had not known humans were that old. He set the thought aside. Age was not a weapon either. Tactical, he said. What is the current read on those unidentified energy signatures? The tactical officer checked his station. His face changed slightly, just a fraction. But Drath saw it. Fleet Commander. The signatures have changed. They're no longer faint. Drath turned. Meaning what? Meaning they've powered up, sir. The officer's voice was careful and controlled. All of them. Simultaneously, in the last 4 minutes, the command deck was quiet. How many? Drath said. The officer ran the count. It took a moment, because the signatures were spread widely across the inner system, and there were more of them now than the sensor sweep had originally found. Many more. Fleet Commander. We are reading over 3,000 individual power signatures. Nobody on the command deck spoke. Drath looked at his sensor display. 3,000. Spread across the inner solar system, each one small, each one now showing active power levels. They had been invisible on arrival, or near enough, powered down, cold, waiting. Like something in hibernation. Like something that had been placed there on purpose. Waiting for exactly this moment. He thought about the human director's words. We are prepared for this fight. This is not bravado. This is a statement of fact. All ships, shields to full power, Drath said. His voice was level, weapons hot. Maintain formation. And across the inner solar system, in 3,000 small vessels that the Vorkai had dismissed as debris when they first arrived, power levels continued to climb. They were not ships. That was the first thing the Vorkai tactical teams established in the frantic 10 minutes after the signatures powered up. The 3,000 objects were not warships in any traditional sense. They had no crew sections, no life support, no bridge, no command structure. They were machines, unmanned, roughly 2 meters long, shaped like nothing the Vorkai had ever classified in their database of alien weapons systems. Some were cylindrical, some were angular. All of them were now pointing in the same direction. At the Vorkai fleet, Fleet Commander Drath stood in front of his sensor display and absorbed this information with a stillness that his officers, watching him, found either reassuring or terrifying depending on how long they had served under him. Power output analysis, he said. The tactical officer, a steady professional named Vorel, ran the calculations. He had been running them since the signatures spiked. His screen was full of numbers. Some of the numbers were making him recalibrate his estimates, because the first results had come out wrong, and then the second results had also come out wrong, and the third results were telling him something that he was having real difficulty putting into a sentence. Fleet Commander, Vorel said carefully. The individual power output of each unit is small, comparable to a light shuttle engine. Then they are not a threat to our shields individually, Drath said. No, sir. A pause. But they do not appear to be designed to operate individually. Drath looked at him. Explain. The power signatures. I have been watching the frequency modulation for the last 8 minutes. They are linked. Every unit in the network is communicating with every other unit on a shared frequency. They are a distributed system. Not 3,000 separate weapons. One weapon. 3,000 components. The command deck processed this. Drath turned to his communications officer. Get me a channel to all fleet captains. In the hole, Vasquez watched the sensor displays with the same focus she had been bringing to them for the last 6 hours without sleep. The coffee beside her had gone cold. She had not noticed. Shepard network is at full activation, Patel said from his station. His voice had the tight quality of a man trying to sound calmer than he was. All 3,012 units are networked and responsive. Central coordination is holding. How long until they're in the optimum engagement window? At their current approach speed, 14 minutes. They're still in long range. I would not fire at this distance. He hesitated. Director, I want to note again that we have never tested this system at full scale against a real fleet. The simulations suggest. I know what the simulations suggest, Vasquez said. I've read them. When they're in the window, we fire. Patel nodded and went back to his screens. Kane appeared at her shoulder. Our conventional forces are in position. If Shepard doesn't perform as expected, we have the fallback formations ready. Vasquez said nothing. She was watching the fleet's approach on the main display. 40 red marker, moving in tight formation. Their battle configuration, clear, disciplined, tight spacing, overlapping defensive fields, exactly as the Sulhari records had described. The Sulhari had tried to fight the Vorkai with conventional warships. They had matched the Vorkai's formation with their own fleet, trading fire, trying to use numbers and bravery to compensate for the technology gap. They had lost 200 ships in 6 hours. Then they had lost their home system. Then they had lost everything. The lesson Vasquez had taken from that record was not that the Sulhari should have fought harder. It was that they had fought the wrong fight. The Vorkai were supreme at conventional fleet engagement. There was no point in fighting them conventionally. You did not beat the best boxer in the world by trying to box them. Patel had understood this immediately 11 years ago, when she had first shared the Sulhari records with him. He had spent one evening reading the records, slept on it, and come back the next morning with a sketch on a notepad. It was rough, barely legible, but the concept was clear. You don't fight their ships, he had said. You fight the space between their ships. 11 years later, that notepad sketch was the most expensive weapons project in human history, and it was about to be tested. Drath was 2 minutes into his all-captain channel communication when the first Shepard units fired. The effect was not what anyone on his fleet expected, because they did not understand what they were looking at. It was not a beam weapon. It was not a projectile. It was not any classification of energy weapon the Vorkai database contained. What the forward sensor operator on the destroyer Vorkai Swift described, in the report that would be filed later, was a spatial distortion event originating from outside the ship. The Vorkai Swift was in the forward position of the fleet's left flank. It was a fast destroyer, 240 meters long, crewed by 108 personnel. Its shields were at maximum power and its weapons were hot. It was exactly where the battle formation required it to be. It ceased to exist at 14:32 Geneva time on a Tuesday afternoon. Not destroyed in the traditional sense. Not blown apart by an explosion. leaving debris and energy signatures for the sensors to track. The Vorkay Swift's hull, all 240 meters of it, simply stopped being present in its location and did not appear anywhere else that sensors could find. Gone. The fleet's sensor network registered its disappearance as a glitch for 0.3 seconds. Then the computers caught up and redesignated the contact as destroyed. Drath was still on the all-captain channel when it happened. He saw the Swift's signal vanish on his tactical display, a ship that had been in his fleet for 3 years, crewed by people he had personally reviewed. There one moment and not there the next. Swift report, his communications officer said. Procedure. Even when you already knew. No response. Weapon signatures, Drath said. Nothing we can classify, Fleet Commander. There was a spatial anomaly reading at the Swift's position approximately 0.4 seconds before its signal was lost. We have no category for the reading. Drath kept his voice even. All ships evasive, maintain formation integrity. Sensor teams, full analysis of the anomaly reading now. The fleet began its evasive maneuver. It was a good maneuver, precise, disciplined. The kind of response that took years of training and experience to execute at fleet scale without losing formation integrity. The Vorkay were very good at it. It did not help. The second disappearance happened 40 seconds later. The dreadnought Unbroken Fist, 1,200 meters long, 600 crew, 4 massive main batteries capable of stripping the atmosphere from a small moon. There one moment, not there the next. No debris, no explosion, no final message from the crew, no wreckage tumbling away from the point of impact. Nothing, just absence absolute and complete, like a light that someone had switched off. In the hole, Vasquez watched the dreadnought's marker disappear from the tactical display. Around her, the room was so quiet she could hear the ventilation system. Then someone said very quietly, "Oh my God," not in fear, in awe. Patel was shaking slightly, she noticed. His hands on his keyboard were unsteady. He was staring at his screens with the expression of a man watching 11 years of his life either succeed beyond anything he had dared to imagine or fail in the most public way possible. He could not yet tell which. The numbers kept updating. The Shepard units were cycling through their firing sequence. The network was functioning exactly as designed. Better than designed, actually. The coordination latency was lower than the simulations had predicted, which meant the firing rate was higher than expected. "It's working," Patel said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "It's actually working." In space, the Vorkay fleet was in trouble. The third, fourth, and fifth disappearances happened in the span of 90 seconds. A cruiser, another destroyer, a second dreadnought, each one vanishing without trace, without debris, without the kind of dying that ships are supposed to do when they are destroyed. The Vorkay fleet's sensor network was screaming with anomaly readings that its analysis systems could not categorize, because they had never been programmed to categorize this. Drath stood at his station and watched his fleet shrink on the tactical display and forced himself to think clearly, to work the problem, to find the response. This was what the Vorkay did. This was why they had won 164 times. Find the pattern, find the source, neutralize it, tactical, trace the anomaly readings back to their origin points. Vorel was already doing it. He had been doing it since the first disappearance. The problem was that the anomaly readings did not trace back to a single origin point. They traced back to thousands of origin points, distributed across the entire inner system, each one firing in a coordinated sequence that Vorel's analysis system was working hard to map. Fleet Commander, the source is distributed. 3,000 individual units. Each unit produces a localized spatial distortion of limited range and power. The units are networked. They're firing in coordinated sequences that create compound events at the target point. "Can we target them?" Drath said. "Yes, sir. Their positions are now clearly readable. We can engage them." "Do it. All forward batteries, prioritize the nearest units. Destroy them." The fleet opened fire. Vorkay main batteries were powerful. They were among the most destructive directed energy weapons in the galaxy. They could burn through conventional hull armor at long range, and had once, in the Thalori campaign, cut a military orbital station in half with a 3-second burst. The Shepard units had no hull armor. They were small, unshielded machines. The first Vorkay salvo destroyed 46 of them cleanly, each one hit, each one gone. 3,012 units became 2,966. The network did not miss a beat. The coordination frequency adjusted automatically for the missing nodes. The firing sequence continued. Another Vorkay ship vanished. Drath understood then. Not fully. Not in a way that told him how the weapon worked at a physics level, but tactically. With the cold clarity that had made him the best fleet commander his empire had, he understood the math. 40 warships. They could destroy approximately 100 of those units per salvo with coordinated fire if every ship was dedicated to the task. The network had started with over 3,000. To reduce it below operational effectiveness, if it had such a threshold, which was not guaranteed, they would need to dedicate every gun in the fleet to engaging targets that were spread across an enormous volume of space, while those targets were actively destroying his fleet one ship at a time. He could not fight the fleet battle and destroy the network simultaneously. All ships concentrate fire on the network units, he ordered. Destroy as many as possible. Fastest possible rate. The fleet was down to 34 ships now. He could see it on the display. 34 ships fired everything they had. In the hole, Vasquez saw the incoming fire data and watched Shepard units being destroyed. The count ticked down from 3,012 to 2,900 to 2,700. The Vorkai were shooting fast and accurately, and they were doing damage. Will they bring the network below operational threshold, Kane said. Patel shook his head. Not at that rate. Every unit they destroy, they lose another ship first. The math doesn't work for them. How many ships do they have left? Patel checked. The display shows 32. On the tactical display, the red markers continued to wink out, one at a time. The pace was not fast, but it was relentless. Every 40 to 60 seconds, another ship ceased to exist. No wreckage, no emergency signals, no escape pods broadcasting their positions. Nothing remained of the ships the Shepard network was taking. That was the point. That was the physics of it. Patel had not told anyone, even Vasquez, the full detail of what the Shepard units actually did. Not because it was classified, though it was. Because he was not certain that anyone would have approved the project if they fully understood. The Shepard units did not destroy ships. They relocated them to a point in space approximately 4 light-years from the solar system, inside a region of dense molecular cloud where navigation was effectively impossible, and no habitable world existed within range of even a Vorkai ship's fuel capacity. He had chosen to describe this to Vasquez as removal from the combat zone. She had accepted this description. He watched the red markers disappear and thought about what it meant to be a crew member on one of those ships. One moment in a solar system, in a battle, knowing where you were. The next moment, somewhere else, alone in the dark, surrounded by gas cloud, with no way to know where home was. He was not sure whether that was more merciful or less merciful than being destroyed. He had decided not to think about it too hard and had gone back to the engineering. On the Vorkai's fist, Drath was down to a fleet of 20 ships. His communications officer had been trying to reach Vork Prime for the last 40 minutes. The message would take time to travel, but he needed to send it. Fleet Command needed to know what was happening here. What kind of weapon they were facing. The physics readings his sensor team had gathered, incomplete and baffling as they were, needed to reach people who could analyze them properly. He had also sent a personal message to Supreme Commander Zeth Kar. It was short. He had not known how to make it longer. Supreme Commander, we are facing a weapon without precedent. It leaves no wreckage. I do not understand its function. We have destroyed approximately 400 of their network units. They have more than 2,000 remaining, and the rate of attrition is not sufficient. I am going to attempt a retreat and regroup. I believe we need more ships and better information. 23 ships lost. No debris, no remains. Fleet Commander Drath, he sent the message and turned back to his tactical display. 18 ships now. The Shepard units were still firing. Still coordinated. Still relentless. Fleet Commander, Ross said quietly. He had been standing beside Drath's station for the last hour. Should we begin a retreat maneuver? Drath looked at his fleet. 18 ships. 47 minutes ago he had had 40. The network still had over 2,000 units operational. His gunners were destroying them as fast as they could, but it was not enough and everyone on the command deck knew it. He looked at the blue-green planet on the long-range display. Turning. Quiet. He thought about the human director's message. This situation may be different from those you have encountered before. Not bravado. A statement of fact. Yes, he said. All ships begin a retreat maneuver. Full drive power. We are leaving the system. It was the first time in 4 campaigns in his entire career that Drath had said those words. The retreat order went out at 16:04 Geneva time. The 18 remaining ships of the Vorkai fleet turned, drives at full power, forming up as best they could, pulling away from the inner system and toward the outer edge of the solar system, and whatever lay beyond it. The maneuver was clean, disciplined. Even now, with less than half the fleet remaining, the Vorkai executed a battle withdrawal the way they did everything else, with precision and control. Drath watched the inner system fall behind on his rear sensor display. The planet, the orbital stations, the network. He watched it all recede as his fleet built speed, and for a brief moment something in his chest loosened slightly. They were moving. They were getting out. They still had 18 ships. The retreat was working. Then the sensor officer said, "Fleet Commander, the network units are moving." He turned. "Moving where?" "They're repositioning." The officer's voice was very careful. "Ahead of us. They're spreading into an intercept pattern." Drath looked at the tactical display. He saw it. The network units, those small, unmanned, relentless machines, were not just sitting in the inner system waiting for the Vorkai to come to them. They were mobile. They could pursue. Of course, they could. Of course they could. He looked at the numbers. How many network units had his fleet destroyed during the battle? Over 400. The network had started with just over 3,000. That left roughly 2,600 operational units. And they were now spreading out ahead of his retreating fleet in a pattern that was going to cut off the escape route. "Can we go around them?" he said. The tactical officer ran the calculations. It took 30 seconds. 30 seconds in which nobody on the command deck spoke. "No, Fleet Commander. Their repositioning speed is sufficient to keep the intercept pattern ahead of us, regardless of heading changes at our current drive output. To outrun the repositioning, we would need to increase drive power beyond safe operational limits." "Increase drive power anyway," Drath said. The engineer's report came back in 2 minutes. They could push the drives to 120% of rated output. It would risk drive failure. It might work. It did not work. The network units were faster at their repositioning speed than the fleet was at 120% drive power. The intercept pattern held and tightened as the Vorkai ships pushed harder. Every heading change the fleet made was matched. They were not being allowed to leave. In the hole, Vasquez watched the retreat attempt on the tactical display with her arms folded and her expression blank. "They're trying to run," Kane said. "I know. Do we let them?" Vasquez was quiet for a moment. This was the question she had thought about more than any other in the 11 years of building Shepard. Not the technical questions, not the physics, not the engineering. This question: do we let them run? If she let them run, they went back to Vork Prime with sensor data, with information about what they had faced, with the knowledge that Earth had something that could defeat their fleet. They would come back. They would come back with more ships, better prepared, having analyzed whatever fragments of information their sensors had gathered. They had a wall with 164 names on it. They would not accept the loss of a single campaign without response. If she did not let them run, no information went back. No sensor data, no battle reports, no returning ships to tell the story of what had happened here. The Vorkai Empire would send a fleet to Earth, and that fleet would not come back. And no one in the galaxy would know why. That was a different message. She had thought about it for 11 years. "No," she said, "we don't let them run." Patel heard her from his station. He did not say anything. He turned back to his screens and made the adjustments to the network's targeting parameters that the order required. His hands were steady now. Whatever shaking had been in them earlier, in the battle, was gone. He was deep in the work, in the place he always went when there was a problem to solve. And in that place, his hands were always steady. The network units completed their repositioning and began their final engagement sequence. Drath's fleet had 13 ships when the second phase of the network's attack began. He had one option left and he took it. He split the fleet. 7 ships broke left, 6 broke right. 2, including his flagship, continued on the original heading. It was a maneuver designed to force the network to divide its attention, to thin out the intercept pattern, to create at least one lane of escape for at least some of his ships. It was a good maneuver. It was the correct tactical response to his situation. 3 of the 7 ships on the left vector disappeared before they had traveled 2 minutes on the new heading. 2 of the 6 ships on the right vector disappeared in the same interval. The network did not thin. The network did not choose a direction and commit to it and leave the others uncovered. It adapted. Instantly. Every change in the Vorkai formation was met with a coordinated redistribution of the network units that maintained coverage across all vectors simultaneously. 11 ships, then 9, then 6. Then the Vorkai's Fist Fleet Commander Drath's flagship was alone. He did not know what had happened to the other ships because their signals had simply vanished. The same way every other ship in the fleet had vanished, one by one. No last messages. No distress signals, no debris, just gone. Drath stood on his command deck and looked at his tactical display. One ship, one red marker, alone in the outer reaches of the solar system. Around it, the network units were repositioning for what was clearly a final engagement sequence. He thought about many things in the next few moments. He thought about Vork Prime and the wall and the 164 gold names. He thought about his captains and their crews and where they might be now, if anywhere. He thought about the human director's message, which he had read and reread many times since it arrived, and which he understood now in a way that he had not understood when he first received it. 300,000 years. He thought about what a species looked like after 300,000 years of surviving. After all the wars and plagues and disasters they had clearly lived through, because they were still here. After watching civilizations around them die off in the records. After receiving a warning from the Sulhari, maybe, in the same way they had received warnings the Vorkai had never seen. After 11 years or more, maybe much more, of building something specifically for this, not for glory, not for expansion, because something was coming for them and they intended to still be here when it arrived. He sent one final message to Vork Prime. It was short. Supreme Commander, 18 ships cannot retreat. Network has containment capability. All ships lost except flagship. I do not expect to report again. Recommend no further engagement with this species until the nature of their weapon is fully understood, if understanding is possible. They were ready. They have always been ready. Drath. He sent it. Then he stood up straight and folded his hands behind his back and waited. The Vorkai's fist disappeared at 1751 Geneva time. In the hole, the last red marker winked out of the tactical display. The room went completely silent. Vasquez stood at the table and looked at the display. Where there had been 40 markers representing the greatest fleet the Vorkai Empire had sent on a campaign in 20 years, there was now nothing. Empty space. The solar system looked exactly as it had looked that morning, except that the Shepherd units were now beginning their long, slow repositioning back to their dormant positions throughout the inner system. 31 seconds of silence, then someone at the back of the room started to clap. Slowly. One person. Then two. Then 10. Then all of them. The entire whole. 240 people on duty in that room at that moment, standing up and clapping until the sound filled the chamber and bounced off the walls. Some of them were crying. Some were laughing. Some were doing both at the same time, which is the thing humans do when the emotion is too big to fit in any one shape. Vasquez did not clap. She stood at the table with her arms folded and looked at the clean display. Not because she was not moved, because she was thinking. Kane put a hand on her shoulder briefly. That was enough. Patel was still at his station, running numbers. He would be running numbers for hours, she knew, assessing the network's performance, identifying what had worked exactly as planned, and what had worked better or worse than expected. He would produce a report that was thorough and precise, and would be classified for many decades. She would read every word of it. What's the status of the conventional forces? She said when the applause had settled. No engagements, Kane said. The network handled the entire battle. Our warships never fired a shot. Good. She was quiet for a moment. What about the other species out there? The ones who are watching? This was the other half of the question she had spent years thinking about. Earth was not alone in the galaxy. The Sulhari's warning had made that clear, and the survey drone signals had confirmed it over the years. There were other civilizations. Some of them had been watching this solar system, she suspected, since the Vorkai fleet set out. Word traveled among the species who had reason to fear the Vorkai. Some of those species had reached out tentatively, carefully through years of intercepted signals and careful back-channel contacts, to see if Earth was aware of its situation. Earth had given those contacts careful, non-committal responses that amounted to, "We know we are handling it. Please do not interfere." Now there was something to report back. Vasquez sat down and began composing the message. It went out 12 hours later, on the broadest spectrum broadcast that Earth's transmitters could manage. Not on the frequency the Vorkai had used. On the frequency the Sulhari had used for their warning. The frequency that humanity had always suspected other civilizations in the region monitored. The message was short. It said, "This is Earth. The Vorkai fleet that was dispatched to this system has been defeated. No ships were permitted to leave. No wreckage was left. We are aware that other civilizations in this region have experienced aggression from the Vorkai Empire. We are aware of their record of 164 victories. We are also aware that other species may have built defensive capabilities during this time. We extend the following offer to any civilization currently under threat from the Vorkai or any comparable aggressor. We are willing to share the technology and methods that we used in this engagement. We ask for nothing in return except that you use what we share to defend your own people, not to become the next aggressor. We are not interested in empire. We are not interested in expanding our territory. We are interested in making the galaxy a harder place to bully. Earth, out." Vasquez reviewed the message twice before sending it. Kane had suggested making it longer. Patel had suggested making it more technically precise. She had sent it as written. On Vork Prime, the message from Drath arrived 6 weeks after the battle. Zethkar read it alone, in the council chamber, standing before the wall of proof. He had been told already that the fleet had not returned. The first absence of a returning fleet in Vorkai history. He had been waiting for Drath's final message, hoping it contained something he could use. Some analysis of what had happened that he could hand to his scientists, and Ingene,